abilities by consuming the fruit of the skill tree. With a bit of luck, you might end up as a firebender or even a sword saint. However, for Light, his fate was quite different. He ended up as nothing more than a nutting master. On the day when skills were to be bestowed, Light and his childhood friend Lena were on their way to the church to undergo the ceremony. The two chatted excitedly about the skills they dreamed of acquiring. Light had always aspired to be an adventurer, so he would be thrilled with any skill that was combat-oriented. Lena, on the other hand, wasn't too concerned about what skill she might receive, as long as it meant she could stay by Light's side. Still, she was a bit nervous since no one really knows what kind of skill they'll get until they eat the fruit. But Light was sure they would both get amazing skills. However, we already know how that turned out for him. When he and Lena went into the church that day, the Holy Sister told them all about how the skill fruits work. You're granted a skill once you eat the fruit, and it will guarantee you a job in any related field of your choice, all without any crippling student loan debt. They were given the opportunity to choose any one of these fruits to gain their skill, but there was one unbreakable rule. You could only consume one skill fruit in your entire life. Attempting to eat a second fruit would result in poisoning. Many had lost their lives because they were dissatisfied with their skill and decided to take a second fruit. The Holy Sister emphasized this point, making it absolutely clear that eating more than one fruit carried a 100% fatality rate. Lena was taken aback by how dangerous the fruits could be, but the Holy Sister reassured her that as long as she refrained from eating a second fruit, there was no cause for concern. With the warnings out of the way, the Holy Sister told them to begin selecting their fruit. Lena stepped up first. She took a bite out of one of the fruits, and she immediately felt something happening to her body. There was a blinding light, and Lena's body suddenly became very hot. The Holy Sister realized this must be the legendary Sword Saint skill. It was incredibly rare, so she never thought she would get to see someone acquire it in person. But now that Lena was officially a Sword Saint, she was destined to become one of the greatest adventurers in the country. Light was genuinely thrilled for Lena and congratulated her on obtaining such an incredible skill. But now, it was his turn. He approached the altar and carefully selected a skill fruit for himself. While he didn't expect to gain something as extraordinary as the Sword Saint skill, he still hoped for a decent combat skill that would allow him to stand alongside Lena in battle. However, as he took a bite and felt the skill flow into his body, his heart sank. It turned out he was just a nut master. The Holy Sister did her best to offer some encouragement, but it was clear that the only battles Light would be facing were against pests out in the fields. Light was devastated that his dreams of being an adventurer had been ruined, so he asked if he could try again. But the sister was very clear about the 100% fatality rate, so she wouldn't let him eat another fruit. Lena tried to cheer Light up and told him she would stay in the village and grow fruits with him since she didn't care what she did as long as they were together. But the Holy Sister wouldn't stand for all this love and compassion BS. Lena's Sword Saint skill was a once-in-a-decade marvel, so she wasn't going to let her waste that talent by becoming a farmer. She demanded that Lena become an adventurer for the sake of the country, and in fact, she would be taking her to the royal capital immediately so she could begin her training there. Lena couldn't find the courage to defy the Holy Sister's demands, so she was taken away. However, she made a heartfelt promise to return for Light one day. 3 months had gone by since that life-changing day, and Light was doing his best to embrace his new reality by focusing on his role as a farmer. Using his powers, he ensured the nuts grew large and healthy, and once they were ripe, he sold them in town to earn a profit. Life wasn't terrible for him, as long as he kept those nagging thoughts buried deep in the back of his mind. One day, he headed into town to sell his nuts, but since his nuts were so small, he got paid very little for them. As he was walking back to his house, he noticed a poster with some news about Lena. She had apparently been promoted to S rank in the 3 months since she left the village and was doing incredibly well for herself. Of course, he was happy for her, but thinking about how well she was doing just made him feel like an absolute failure, even though he knew he didn't have the skill to become an adventurer. Light had been training every day in hopes that he might naturally unlock a sword skill or something. He swung his sword at a tree stump over and over, convinced that if he could manage to split it in half, he could prove himself strong enough to become an adventurer through his own effort. But hard work doesn't always yield results, and all he gained from his relentless training were a pair of bruised wrists. Collapsing to the ground in defeat, he began to wonder if Lena still remembered him. She had promised to return, but with all the fame and fortune she must have achieved, he wouldn't be surprised if she had completely forgotten both his name and his face. Just then, a little girl named Isla walked up to Light and said she brought him a cup of water. She was pretty much an orphan, and the village chief didn't want to deal with her, so he kind of just left her on Light's doorstep one day. Light saw that she had nowhere to go, so he decided to take her in, and the two had been living together ever since. Isla told him she was done with dinner, so if he wanted to, he could come inside to eat, and Light happily obliged. He took his first bite of the food, and while he ate, Isla asked him how today's harvest went. All in all, Light remarked that today's profits were quite decent, especially now that he had started focusing on cultivating skill fruits. He made a point to mention that he had carefully sorted all the skill fruits into boxes clearly marked with skull emojis, emphasizing that Isla absolutely must not eat any of them. Isla, however, hadn't been aware of the dangers associated with consuming skill fruits, so Light's warning was definitely helpful, or at least it would have been an hour earlier, as she had already used several of those fruits to prepare the stew they were currently eating. Light got up in a panic and asked if she was sure she put skill fruits in the stew, but she definitely did. And from what the Holy Sister said, eating a second skill fruit was a guaranteed death sentence. All of a sudden, Light's body began to feel hot. He felt a pain in his chest, so he believed this was how he would die. He fell to the floor, and in his final breath, he apologized to Isla because this was his fault for expecting her to understand the labels when she didn't know how to read yet. As he lay on the ground waiting for death to claim him, Light noticed that it was taking far longer than expected. Sitting up, he was stunned to find himself completely unharmed. Isla noticed the bewildered look on Light's face and asked if he was okay. That was precisely the source of his confusion. Consuming a second skill fruit was supposed to be fatal, so how was he still alive? Just then, a sharp headache struck him, accompanied by the surge of a new skill's power flowing through his body. Isla started to feel a sharp pain in her body as well, and since she ate the stew, that must mean she was about to acquire a skill too. All of a sudden, she was able to see words floating in front of Light and read out the info of his Nut Master skill. In addition to the ability to grow nuts, Light's skill also made him immune to all nut poisons. Light is taken aback and questions Isla about how she knows this. She explains that she can see words floating in the air, and Light quickly deduces that she must have gained some kind of appraisal skill. Isla continues reading through Light's information and discovers that he now has a second skill. She informs him that the new ability is called Sword God. The Sword God skill significantly boosts Light's attack power whenever he wields a sword and also provides a substantial increase to his magic resistance. If what Isla says is true, this could mean that Light's dream might finally become a reality. Light wants to test it out for himself. He runs outside with his sword and goes back into the forest to see if he really has a new sword skill. He raises his sword, and with a single swing, he slashes the tree stump in half as well as the bigger tree behind it. It's safe to say that, as of this moment, Light is overpowered. The following day, Light heads into town with the goal of visiting the guild and finally becoming an adventurer. He's brimming with excitement, as this has always been a dream of his. The first thing that catches his eye is the notice board filled with bounty quests. If they can successfully complete one, they'll have enough money to buy better equipment and delicious food. However, earning money isn't the only reason Light came here today. He's determined to test just how effective his Sword God skill will be in combat. If things go well, he might finally achieve his goal of becoming an official adventurer. He tells Isla to sit on a bench and wait for him while he gets a quest at the front desk. While he's gone, Isla takes the opportunity to use her appraisal skill on all the people in the guild. She's amazed by all the different types of skills that exist, but she's also shocked by how useless some of them are, like this guy who has a self-damaging skill. At that moment, Isla hears a commotion coming from the front desk. When she looks over, she sees Light caught up in a heated argument with one of the adventurers in the guild. The man recognizes Light as the guy who's always selling nuts in the market and mocks him, declaring that someone like him doesn't belong in the guild. Light, however, pays him no attention and simply turns to Isla, saying they can leave now. The guy is offended that Light would dare to ignore him, so his completely normal reaction is to attack Light with his sword. Light's Sword God skill also improves his reflexes, so he is easily able to block the attack. The guy had no idea Light could do that, so he fully intended to catch a murder charge today. The guy's friends see that Light is capable of defending himself, so they convince him to just walk away because this isn't a fight he can win. Jean tries to play off his outburst and claims he never really intended to hurt Light, so he and his friends leave the guild to go on their first mission. Shortly after, Light and Isla leave as well since Light has gotten the quest for them. They make their way to the rocky plains, and Light is filled with excitement at the thought of finally encountering a monster in real life. Knowing how dangerous the area is, he warns Isla to stay close to him. Before long, they spot their target, a slime monster, in the distance, and Light readies himself for battle. He moves cautiously, trying to sneak up on it, but the slime notices him regardless. Switching tactics, Light opts for a direct frontal attack. With his newfound strength, he charges at the slime, slicing it cleanly in half and unintentionally splitting the ground beneath it in the process. He's happy that his skill really is useful in battle, but he knows he's going to have to work on his power management so he doesn't cause any more collateral damage. Isla congratulates Light on his first successful quest, but to complete the quest, they need to cut the slime up and bring the parts back to the guild so they can exchange it for money. Isla says she feels kind of bad about cutting the slime's body up, but Light reminds her that they'll earn enough money for pizza if they sell the slime parts. Isla throws her morals out the window and begins dissecting the slime. At that moment, they hear shouting coming from the other side of the plains. Rushing over, they find Jean and his party under attack by a massive ogre. The group had deliberately chosen an easy quest, planning to kill a slime and head home, but they never anticipated encountering an ogre. The orc swings its weapon at them, forcing everyone to leap out of the way. Even though they manage to avoid the initial strike, it's clear they have no chance of defeating such a formidable opponent. Light calls over to them to ask if they are all right, and as soon as Jean spots him, he comes up with a plan to escape. He and his friends start running straight at Light. Light is a bit confused by what they are doing, but then they run past him, and he realizes they are trying to use him as bait so they can flee. The ogre now intends to attack Light, so he has no choice but to fight it. In fact, this works out well for him since he needs to test the limits of his new skill. The ogre swings its mace toward him, and Light quickly jumps to the side to dodge the attack. However, his approach is dangerous, prompting Isla to warn him that his sword god skill doesn't enhance his defense. If he takes even a single hit, it could be fatal. Despite the risk of death, Light remains determined not to back down. He's resolved to become the world's greatest adventurer. And if he's serious about achieving that dream, he knows he must conquer this challenge. He has finally gotten used to his body's new strength, so Light jumps into the air. As the ogre tries to strike him, he slashes its mace in half. No matter what it takes, he will make sure he catches up to Lena so the two of them can be together again. In one swift motion, he brings his sword down and cuts the ogre cleanly in half, all while Jean and his friends watch from a nearby hill. A short time later, Light heads back to the guild to trade his items for money. The receptionist, however, finds it difficult to believe that he managed to take down an ogre on his own. To prove it, Light presents the ogre horn he brought back, and to back him up, Jean's friends confirm that they witnessed the entire fight and can vouch for him. Convinced by their testimony, the receptionist accepts his story and asks him to wait a moment while she retrieves his reward. Meanwhile, Jean's friends thank Light once again for saving them. At that moment, a crowd begins to gather near the front of the guild, prompting Light to ask if something has happened. Jean explains that the S-rank party has just returned. This is the very same S-rank party that Lena joined, and it's the first time Light has seen her in the past 3 months. Light approaches her and tries to greet her, but to his shock, Lena responds by saying, "I've never met this man before in my life." Light is completely crushed and can't wrap his head around the fact that Lena forgot about him in just 3 months. He's left standing there, his mouth hanging open in shock. Isla, clueless about what's bothering him, tries to lift his spirits and proposes they go out for some pizza. Light agrees and takes Isla to grab pizza, but his gloomy demeanor persists. Frustrated, Isla warns him that if he doesn't pull himself together soon, she'll eat all the pizza herself. Light spent a lot of money on this pizza, so even if he's upset about Lena, there's no way he's letting it go to waste. However, he eats so fast that he ends up choking. Luckily, someone hands him a glass of water to wash it down. He looks up to thank the helpful stranger, but to his surprise, the stranger turns out to be Lena. He's about to yell her name, but Lena covers his mouth and tells him to be quiet, otherwise Grouse is going to hear them. She sits down at the table, and Isla introduces herself since this is the first time she's actually met Lena. Lena is just about to question how Light managed to have a kid in only 3 months, but before she gets the chance, Light interrupts to ask her what she's doing there. Honestly, Lena is asking herself the same thing about Light since she never thought she'd encounter him at the guild. Light, clearly proud, tells her that he and Isla have become adventurers. He then goes on to share the story about the skill fruit incident, which allowed him to obtain a second skill. Lena appears genuinely happy for him, as this means he's finally on the path to achieving his dream. Light then asks Lena how her time with the S-rank party sacred has been so far, but from Lena's expression, it doesn't seem like it's been much fun. She's basically just being forced to fight with a bunch of random people that the Holy Sister selected. The pay is great, but the atmosphere is more toxic than a Call of Duty lobby, so she advises Light to stay away from Sacred if he wants to enjoy his time as an adventurer. Light still doesn't see what's so terrible about Sacred, especially since he's heard so many positive things about them. However, Lena recalls an incident from 2 months ago when their party faced off against a giant serpent. Knowing that serpents are weak to fire, Grouse instructed the mage to attack it with fire magic. The mage complied but went overboard, accidentally setting a nearby farm ablaze. When Lena tried to bring it up, hoping they could do something to stop the fire, Grouse showed no concern at all about destroying a random farmer's land. In his eyes, their mission was to kill the serpent, and they had accomplished that. There was no reason to bother with pointless issues like collateral damage, as long as the main job was completed. She tried explaining the situation to the Holy Sister as well, but she cared about it even less than Grouse did. The Holy Sister doesn't care how much property is destroyed or how many peasants are killed as long as history remembers them as heroes. Lena doesn't tell Light about the twisted views of her party, but Light can tell that she's unhappy with them. So, he invites her to join him and Isla if she wants. However, However, as much as Lena would love that, there are circumstances that prevent her from quitting Sacred. She tells Light she's fine, but he can clearly see her crying, so he knows something must be wrong. However, Lena doesn't want to drag him into her mess, so she leaves the table. A short time later, Light heads to the front desk to claim his reward for defeating the ogre and is handed 10,000 gold pieces, an amount of money far greater than anything he's ever seen before. Yet, he doesn't feel the slightest bit excited. His mind is consumed with worry about Lena, but he realizes he can't help her unless he figures out what Sacred is compelling her to do, and she refuses to tell him directly. With that in mind, Isla suggests that he simply ask Grouse, the party leader, directly since the door to his lounge is conveniently wide open. Inside the lounge, Grouse is currently sitting with two ladies and telling them stories about his legendary battles. For instance, he tells them about his most recent battle, where he and his party were hunting an evil grizzly. To take care of it, they torched the bear with a massive inferno before Grouse delivered the finishing blow. Just then, the receptionist comes in because she has something to talk to Grouse about regarding his recent mission. The people from the village where he found that evil grizzly have lodged a complaint against him, saying that the fire attack that Sacred used caused their reservoir to dry up completely, so now they have no water. Grouse quickly brushes off the complaint, casually making up an excuse that a bit of collateral damage is unavoidable when handling such dangerous monsters. However, deep down, he secretly enjoys causing trouble for those he considers weak, believing they're beneath him. Light overhears the entire conversation and becomes furious because he knows Lena would never ignore the struggles of ordinary people like that. He confronts Grouse, demanding that he release Lena from Sacred since it's obvious she's in distress, but Grouse doesn't take him seriously at all and simply calls security to have Light escorted out of the lounge. Isla rushes over to Light's side to ask if he's alright. Light is fine, but the other adventurers warn him that it's a bad idea to piss him off, because he may be a jerk, but angering him will get you on the Holy Sister's bad side, and if she's got a grudge against you, then it's safe to say that your adventuring career is over. The following day, all the members of Sacred gather in the lounge, indulging in self-praise and reveling in their supposed greatness. Meanwhile, Lena reflects on what Light said about leaving Sacred if it was causing her so much pain. Summoning her courage, she finally speaks up, announcing to everyone that she wants to live as an adventurer guided by her moral code, which is why she's leaving Sacred immediately. As she begins to walk toward the exit, Grouse suddenly blocks her path, moving with alarming speed, and threatens to kill her for having the audacity to defy him. Lena is about to draw her sword to defend herself, but realizes that even with her sword saint skill, it would still be impossible for her to defeat Grouse in one-on-one combat. So, she's forced to submit and takes her hand off her blade. Grouse then backhands her to the floor and begins a half-hearted speech about how she should persevere for the sake of all the people their party will save in the future. He tells her that she's going to have to keep persevering until the day she dies in battle. On that same day, the Sacred Party prepares to leave town, and Lena has resigned herself to a life of being forced to serve under Grouse. However, as they begin their departure, their path is suddenly blocked by Light. Grouse demands to know why Light is standing in their way, to which Light boldly declares that he's there to take back his friend. He turns to Lena, saying that he and Isla were about to go hunt some monsters and would love for her to join them. After all, they made a promise to each other to become adventurers together, and he fully intends to keep that promise. Lena remembers the promise and would love to go with Light, but she doesn't have the strength to go against Grouse. She asks Light to just leave her alone before he gets hurt. Since Lena has rejected Light's offer, Grouse tries to get him to go away, but Light hasn't given up yet. Instead, he declares that he wants to have a duel with Grouse for Lena's freedom. Grouse initially rejects the duel since he has no reason to fight a random nobody, but then Light taunts him by asking if he is scared of losing to a nobody. Grouse couldn't let such public disrespect slide, so he ends up agreeing to Light's duel and plans to make an example out of him. Grouse, however, sets a condition. If Light loses, he will be permanently banned from the Adventurers Guild and will never be allowed to set foot in the city again. Light agrees to the terms without hesitation, but Lena pleads with him to reconsider, fearing he has no chance of winning against Grouse in a sword fight. Grouse draws his sword, ready to strike, but before he makes a move, Isla scans him and warns Light about his Godspeed skill. This ability enables Grouse to close the gap with his opponent almost instantly, so Light must stay on guard against it. Light readies his sword as well, but to keep things fair, he announces that his skills are Nut Master and Sword God. However, Grouse doesn't believe him since there's no way anyone could possibly have two skills. Grouse then closes the distance instantly to attack, and Light could barely see the attack coming, but he does manage to block it. Grouse then repeatedly strikes at Light, forcing him into a defensive position because he can't keep up with all of Grouse's attacks. Light manages to put some distance between them, but it doesn't last long. Grouse appears behind him in a flash and drives his knee into Light's side. No matter where they are on the battlefield, as long as Grouse is within range, he can teleport there instantly. For Light, there's no place that's truly safe. Acknowledging how incredibly strong Grouse is, Light still refuses to give up and charges forward to attack. Unfortunately, Grouse sidesteps just before the strike lands, and while Light is momentarily off balance, Grouse shatters his sword. With Light's weapon destroyed, the battle seems all but decided. However, Grouse is feeling generous today, so he tells Lena that he will spare Light if she swears her undying loyalty to him for the rest of her life. Light, however, tells Lena that she doesn't have to worry because he will find a way to win this match. Light may have been losing up till now, but Lena chooses to put her faith in him and trusts that he can win this battle no matter what. Grouse, sick of all this disrespect, plans to kill Light with his next attack. Light still doesn't have a sword, so he glances around for a substitute and decides to borrow a broom from one of the spectators. Grouse assumes Light is mocking him, and he's not entirely wrong after all. Light could have easily borrowed Lena's sword instead. Despite this, Light is fully confident that he can defeat Grouse with just the broomstick. He begins to visualize it as a real sword and focuses on preparing for Grouse's attacks. Up until now, he's been falling behind because he's been fixated on watching Grouse's movements. However, with his sword god skill granting him exceptional reflexes, this time, Light decides to trust his instincts and strike when the moment feels right. Thanks to Light's changing strategy, his body is able to react the second Grouse gets within range. He uses the broom to smack Grouse's face so hard that he gets sent flying into a brick wall. Grouse is out cold, so Light is officially the winner of their duel. Just to make the point clear, Light turns to the other members of Sacred and tells them that if they come after Lena again, then they will have to deal with him. He then turns to Lena and tells her that she's finally free. Once again, he invites her to join his party, and Lena happily accepts. A week has gone by since Light's duel with Grouse, and not much has changed since then. He's still tending to his nuts, but now he has Lena by his side, which has made him much happier. Lena has prepared lunch for everyone, and as they eat, she asks Light about the injuries he sustained during his fight with Grouse. Light reassures her that he's feeling great now and is ready to finally join Lena on a mission. Normally, this would be his dream come true, but there's still one lingering problem. Every so often, Lena gets a visitor sent by the Holy Sister. For the past week, this visitor has been trying to get Lena to meet with the Holy Sister to discuss her decision to leave Sacred. However, Lena says there's nothing to discuss because there's nothing that can make her change her mind. Unfortunately, since they've earned the scorn of the Holy Sister, they are now being targeted. As a result, when they go to the guild to pick out a quest, they're only offered the worst jobs available, like killing sewer rats. These jobs don't pay much, so managing their finances is going to be a challenge. However, Lena doesn't seem bothered by it, as she genuinely enjoys being able to help people. She finds fulfillment in tasks like rebuilding destroyed homes, clearing out the sewers, or locating a missing cat. By the end of the day, they've only earned 100 coins, barely enough to afford 3 pizzas. Even so, Lena feels much happier now that she's making a real difference in people's lives, and Light is having more fun than he ever has before. Meanwhile, at the Holy Sister's Cathedral, she informs her assistant that she plans to assign Lena's new party a real job soon. However, this task is S rank, one of the most challenging missions possible. It's unclear whether or not she's secretly hoping that Light doesn't survive the ordeal. The following day, Light and the group set out for the Montes Valley to tackle their latest quest. However, the fog is so dense that Light can barely figure out which direction they're heading. He turns to Lena to confirm if they've reached the correct location, and she reassures him by consulting the map, saying they should be nearing the mansion. Just then, Light's horse suddenly rears up, almost throwing him off as they come upon the mansion, and it's clear that the horse won't be able to make it all the way down there. 3 hours earlier that day, as Light and his group were making their way into the guild to select their next quest, they found the receptionist already waiting for them with a special assignment. She was relieved to see Lena's party and urged them to take on the quest, emphasizing the need for it to be resolved quickly to ensure everyone's safety. However, there was little information available about the situation, and she admitted she had no idea what might be causing it. The trouble began when an adventuring party traveling to the northern Montes Valley vanished during their quest, and every time they sent other adventurers to investigate, they also mysteriously disappeared. What's even more alarming is that both A and B rank adventurers have vanished in that valley, meaning that whatever is behind these disappearances must be extremely powerful. The receptionist gives the group a list of the missing adventurers, and to Lena's shock, she recognizes them. They were the very people who taught her everything she knows about adventuring back when she was just starting out, which makes her deeply concerned for their well-being. The only lead they have is that all the missing adventurers were last seen visiting the residence of the former Count of Montes. Count Montes was a legendary adventurer who amassed great wealth before retiring in the region. While there's no record of what abilities the Count might have had, he passed away over 30 years ago, leaving his mansion to crumble into ruin. Anyway, the mission for Lena's party is to find the missing adventurers as well as determine the cause of all the disappearances. Lena is hesitant to agree to this job since even A and B rank adventurers went missing without a trace. But on the other hand, Light seems really excited because he has always wanted to visit the Montes Valley. Plus, this job will actually earn them a decent reward. So even Isla is on board since it means more pizza for her. The receptionist is just now noticing that Isla is here, so she asks Light if he really intends to take her along with him on the quest. Light tells the receptionist that Isla is a very dependable appraiser, so it's essential for her to accompany him on quests. But that statement raises even more questions since kids as young as Isla shouldn't have skills yet. Light explains that she accidentally ate a skill fruit a while ago, but she didn't die or anything, so everything's fine. With that, the group begins their journey toward the Montes Valley, and now we return to the present. The group is carefully making their way along the side of the mountain, with a steep drop below them. Light reminds Isla to be extra cautious as he takes in the massive mansion ahead. Light finds it hard to believe that someone could amass enough wealth from adventuring alone to afford such a place. However, Lena doesn't think it's too surprising after all. She's only been an adventurer for a few months, and she's already saved enough to buy a house. Light had thought about it before, but now he's even more inspired to build a grand home like this one, where he can grow his fruits and train to his heart's content. Isla gets caught up in the excitement, exclaiming that she wants to build a candy house for herself. Unfortunately, her enthusiasm seems to cloud her judgment, as she starts jumping for joy right on the ledge. As soon as she lands, the ledge collapses beneath her feet, sending her plummeting toward her doom. However, with his quick reflexes, Light manages to grab her hand just in time, only to lose his own balance and tumble over the edge with her. Lena tries to pull them back to safety, but she gets dragged down as well, and the entire group ends up falling. As they plummet, Light realizes he needs to act fast to avoid a disastrous landing. Thinking quickly, he draws his sword and uses it to slash through the air, generating enough wind pressure to slow their descent. Thanks to this maneuver, they all manage to land safely in one piece. However, just because they survived the fall doesn't mean they are safe, since Lena and Isla soon realize that they've been surrounded. Light doesn't seem too bothered since he's sure he can handle whatever kind of monsters these are, so he charges forward and slashes one of the monsters in half. Light was right about the monsters being easy to defeat, but Lena and Isla realize that these are no ordinary monsters. Now that they mention it, Light pauses for a moment to take a proper look at the monsters, and to his horror, he realizes that they are all adventurers. Isla uses her appraisal skill on the adventurers and informs the group that they've all been turned into undead after being bitten. She also points out that these undead adventurers retain the same skills they had when they were alive, so she warns Light and Lena to exercise extreme caution while facing them. Meanwhile, Light is in the middle of a major moral dilemma because he can't come to terms with the fact that the monster he was so excited to slay used to be human just like him. He gets so distracted that he nearly gets bitten by one of the undead. But before that could happen, Lena steps in and slices it in half. She can understand why Light would be hesitant about fighting the undead, but at the same time, it is their duty as adventurers to put their former comrades to rest. Light understands what she's saying, so he agrees to fight. But for now, they have to retreat into the mansion since there's a chance that there might be survivors in there. Unfortunately, when they open the front door, they discover even more undead adventurers waiting inside. Lena immediately takes the lead, rushing forward to carve a path, cutting through several of the undead with precision. Light is impressed by Lena's deep knowledge of monsters, as she adapts her attack strategies based on her opponents. She knows that undead creatures still resembling humans can be defeated by stabbing through the heart, while skeletal ones require their spines to be severed. Such precise attacks take incredible skill, and even though Light's Sword God skill is technically more powerful than Lena's Sword Saint skill, she still surpasses him in actual combat ability. However, just because he's not as skilled doesn't mean he's going to stand back and let her handle everything alone. Determined to contribute, Light draws his sword and charges at the undead. Light begins cutting through the undead monsters as well, but while he's doing well against them, he completely forgets that Isla has no fighting skills. Stepping away leaves her vulnerable to attack. An undead sneaks up behind her and is about to strike, but just before she could be hit, Lena dashes forward and stabs the undead through the guts in its armor, killing it in one blow. Once the undead disintegrates, Lena asks Isla if she's okay, and Isla begins praising her for being so cool. Lena feels really flattered, but she can't let herself become too overconfident. That little slip-up Light made could have easily cost Isla her life, so he swears that from now on, he will fight with a clear head and won't hesitate anymore so they can all make it out of this alive. With all the undead on this floor taken care of, Lena suggests they move on to the second floor. However, before proceeding, Light brings up something that has been bothering him. They were sent on this mission because 18 adventurers had gone missing here, but even if those adventurers were turned into undead, he and Lena have already defeated far more than 18 undead so far. The only possible explanation is that there were already a large number of undead monsters in this mansion beforehand, but that doesn't add up either. There's no reason for undead to just randomly spawn here. As they head up the staircase, Light notices the painting of Count Montes, and there's something unsettling about it. But even more unsettling is the fact that there's a girl dancing somewhere in the castle, and she's looking forward to all the fun ways she could kill Light. As the three of them run down the hallway, they are suddenly jump scared by an undead that lunges at them. But before it could infect anyone, Light manages to chop its head off. They may have taken care of that first one, but there are a lot more where that came from. So Light and Lena have a lot of work ahead of them. The undead on this floor appear to be using strategy, as evidenced by the ambush they set up. Light asks Isla to scan them and see if she can uncover any useful information. Following his instructions, Isla discovers that these undead have been tamed and are being controlled by someone giving them orders. At that moment, Light notices several threads connected to the undead, and after scanning those as well, Isla realizes that the threads are transmitting magic power to them. This means that whoever is orchestrating this must be at the other end of those threads. After following them for a while, they come across a door where all the threads converge. Light tells everyone to be prepared since they don't know what kind of danger they may face once they head inside. But as he opens the door, all he finds is an empty ballroom. All of a sudden, the girl behind this whole thing appears. While Light was initially glad to finally see a living person, he can tell that she doesn't seem very friendly. Isla uses her appraisal skill on her and discovers that Draitna's skill is necromancy, meaning she can control the dead and even use their unique skills as her own. Having her skill appraised so nonchalantly was deeply irritating to Draitna, and she considers taking Isla out first out of sheer annoyance. Before she can make a move, Light steps in and asks if Draitna was sent here on a mission from the guild, suggesting that if that's the case, there's no reason for them to fight. However, the girl denies it outright, stating that her sole reason for being here is to kill Light. Light doesn't understand why she would be here specifically to kill him because he has never met her before, but Draitna doesn't have a personal grudge against him or anything. She was just given an order to kill him, so that's what she's going to do. Light asks her who gave the order, and it may or may not have been a certain holy sister, but Draitna isn't going to confirm anything. Regardless, if Draitna's goal has always been to kill Light, she must have come here and killed all those adventurers just to lure him out. Lena also finds it strange that she has never once heard of a skill as powerful as necromancy, but she doesn't have much time to think about it because Draitna is beginning her attack. If Light and Lena work together, it's not that hard to deal with the undead, but Draitna has no interest in Lena. Instead, she lures Lena away from Light and sets her up to fight the undead versions of her mentors, Bork and Shira. Lena is horrified to learn that they actually died here, so she is stunned by grief for a moment, but Isla yells over to warn her that these two are a lot more dangerous than the others. They still have full control over their skills, so Bork can grow claws to increase his attack speed and power, while Shira can create a mirror image of herself to attack multiple times. Lena is struggling to keep up with the undead's powerful skills, but thanks to Isla's timely warnings, she manages to defend herself. Meanwhile, Draitna grows increasingly annoyed with the support Isla is providing and decides to eliminate her first. She sends an undead to attack Isla, but this time, Light is ready. Just before Isla can be harmed, Light rushes in and grabs her, vowing to protect her no matter what. However, fighting while ensuring Isla's safety proves to be a daunting task. Draitna continues to send undead after Light, and the moment he shifts his focus, she seizes every opportunity to target Isla directly. Light finds himself barely able to keep up with the relentless onslaught. Meanwhile, Lena is still struggling to come to terms with the fact that she has to kill her mentors. When she was first brought to the Holy City, these two were the first people to show her kindness, so she owes them a great deal. Yet now, she finds herself fighting for her life against them. As much as she doesn't want to do it, she knows that she needs to kill them so she can go help Light and Isla, so she cuts the threads above them to release Draitna's control and prepares her sword to finish the two off. As she does this, she sees a vision of their souls, and they tell her that she doesn't have to feel guilty about finishing them off because it's the right thing to do. With a heavy heart, Lena raises her sword and cuts the two in half. Meanwhile, Light continues to struggle to protect both himself and Isla, as the undead seem endless no matter how many he defeats. Suddenly, he realizes something doesn't add up. There's no way Draitna could have an infinite supply of undead at her disposal. To investigate, he asks Isla to determine whether Draitna has the ability to create undead. According to Isla's appraisal, Draitna lacks that power and can only control undead that already exist. With this revelation, Light urges Isla to examine the situation more closely, convinced that there must be a hidden secret behind the seemingly endless army of undead. Draitna is impressed that Light managed to deduce she's hiding a trick, but she's determined not to let Isla uncover what it is. She immediately sets her sights on eliminating Isla. Light, however, refuses to let that happen and quickly destroys the undead attacking her. Realizing that Draitna is now targeting Isla directly, he knows he can't leave her side for even a moment. Thinking quickly, he comes up with a solution. He places Isla on his back so he can fight at full strength while keeping her safe. While Isla clings to his back, Light inquires whether she can deduce the reason behind the constant appearance of the undead. However, with the zombies constantly shifting and moving, her skill struggles to lock onto anything specific. To provide her with a wider perspective on the situation, Light leaps into the air and grabs hold of a chandelier. From this vantage point, Isla begins scanning all the zombies for any signs of unusual activity. Meanwhile, Light's arm is throbbing in pain, prompting him to urge Isla to speed things up. Before long, Isla identifies the source of the undead swarm and informs Light that one of the zombies in the back possesses a summoning skill. And this isn't just any ordinary zombie, it's none other than Count Montes himself. Dracna is none too pleased about how close they're getting to uncovering her secret, so she attempts to eliminate them. While Light remains suspended from the roof, she summons a Soul Reaper to go after them. After scanning it, Isla warns Light that even a single touch from the scythe will turn him into an undead, making it critical to avoid being hit. To dodge the attack, Light is forced to leap down. At least now they finally understand why there were so many zombies in the area. The Soul Reaper was responsible for turning those adventurers into undead. Dracna praises them for piecing it together, but clarifies that the Soul Reaper originally belonged to Count Montes. There's an ironic twist to it: such a great hero ended up falling victim to his own Soul Reaper. Afterward, any adventurers who came to the mansion to investigate would also be turned into undead. While this explains how everything unfolded, Light is still baffled as to why Count Montes would summon a creature like the Soul Reaper in the first place. The fact that Light can't even begin to understand why infuriates Dracna, prompting her to call him a naive child. When he asks what she means by that, Dracna counters with a question of her own: does he know anything about taboo skills? These are abilities so feared that merely having one earns the scorn of society, and Count Montes' summoning skill was one of them. Initially, people celebrated him as a hero with an extraordinary ability, but his skill proved to be far too overpowered. Sparking fear among the public and the government, they grew concerned that he might eventually embark on a villain arc, so they ostracized him and even falsely accused him of treason. Ironically, that's the exact thing that drove him to his villain arc. The government kept sending assassins after him day in and day out. So one day, he decided, if I'm dying, then we're dying, and summoned his secret treasure. Light had no idea that the guild would do something as shady as sending assassins after Count Montes, but that's enough chit-chat for now because Dracna wants to get on with their fight. This place was practically a dream for her since she could never find this many undead anywhere else. And if she uses her necromancy skill to control a summon user, she can endlessly summon as many dead as she wants. Light prepares his sword to face Dracna once more, but as he does, her words about the people fearing Count Montes' powerful skill linger in his mind. He realizes the same thing could easily happen to him, given that his Fruitmaster skill has the potential to let him acquire an unlimited number of abilities if he chose to. If others were to discover this, they would undoubtedly start treating him like a villain too. The thought of such an outcome weighs on him, but he doesn't have the luxury of dwelling on it. Right now, the priority is protecting Isla and continuing the fight. To that end, Light managed to observe something while he was watching Dracna's undead. It looks like Dracna uses her necromancy to assign targets and attack methods to the undead. Isla confirms this since undead under Dracna's control are only capable of using the same attacks over and over until they are given new instructions. Light comes up with a plan to take advantage of this, so as Dracna sends undead after him, he prepares a counterattack. However, that was just a diversion. He cancels the attack mid-animation and jumps into the air to give Lena an opening to attack. Dracna is taken by surprise by the sudden turn of events and attempts to redirect the Soul Reaper to target Lena instead. However, she's too late before she can even issue the command. Lena has already cut through the undead in a single strike. With the Soul Reaper now out of the picture, the only task remaining is for Light to deal with Count Montes, ensuring Dracna can't use him to summon any more undead. Dracna is starting to get desperate since she's on the verge of losing. Just before Montes' body vanishes, she uses her skill to force him to summon the ultimate monster. This can't be good, so Light and Lena brace themselves for whatever is coming their way. To their horror, a wicked dragon is spawned. Dracna is overjoyed that the summon spell actually worked, but she failed to realize that the dragon isn't undead, so she has no control over it and gets tail whipped away. Lena can hardly believe her eyes as she stands face to face with a wicked dragon, a creature so powerful that even S-rank parties avoid hunting it. Light, however, confidently suggests that they should be able to defeat it if they combine their efforts. Isla quickly shuts down that plan, pointing out that the dragon is entirely immune to slashing attacks. Despite the clear warning from someone with the appraisal skill, Light remains convinced that his sword god skill will give him an edge. Without hesitation, he leaps into the air and attempts to slash the dragon. However, his sword ends up shattering as a result, and he nearly gets hit with a face full of dragon's breath. When he lands, Isla yells at him for not listening to her. There aren't many options left, and the second they turn their backs to the dragon, they are bound to get attacked. Lena is starting to think about sacrificing herself to make sure Light and Isla can get out of this alive, but luckily, Isla has a better plan in mind. She pulls out a skill fruit and tells Light to eat it. While there's no guarantee that a skill fruit will help here, it's it's their best option. Meanwhile, despite being severely injured by the dragon, Drayna feels content with how things have turned out, convinced that there's no way Light can possibly survive against such a beast. Shortly after, she loses consciousness, and a man appears, picks up her body, and teleports away. Returning to Light and the others, Lena questions Isla about why she's carrying a skill fruit, to which Isla responds that she thought it might be useful. Given the danger posed by the wicked dragon, their only chance of victory lies in Light gaining a new skill. Lena is shocked that Light is seriously considering eating another skill fruit, but he assures her it's fine since he's immune to the poison. Despite this, Lena argues it's still a gamble. They have no way of knowing what kind of skill he'll acquire. For all they know, it could be a skill that interferes with his sword god skill. Even so, doing nothing isn't an option if they want to survive. Light takes a bite of the skill fruit, and his body begins burning up as he acquires a new skill and falls to the floor. The dragon starts attacking, so Lena is forced to defend Light until he gets back on his feet. Eventually, the side effects of the skill fruit wear off, so Light asks Isla to appraise him. As she does, she informs him that his new skill is something called bug resistance. Light is disappointed and asks if his skill classifies the wicked dragon as a bug. But no, bug resistance only works on actual bugs. Lena continues doing her best to hold off the dragon, but it's clear she won't be able to keep it up for much longer. Light turns to Isla and asks her to hand him 2 skill fruits at once. Isla hesitates, warning him that eating 2 at the same time could have unpredictable effects on his body. However, Light insists that it's a risk he has to take to increase his chances of gaining a useful skill. He bites into both skill fruits, but much to his disappointment. The first skill he acquires is called Cat Charmer. It only makes cats like him. The second is Weapon Durability Boost, which is completely useless to him now since his sword is already broken. On top of not getting any useful skills, eating 2 skill fruits at once has adverse effects on his body. If he doesn't get a good skill on the next attempt, he's not going to be able to move anymore. At this point, Lena is starting to wear herself out, and as she goes to attack the dragon again, her sword shatters and the dragon whips her into a wall. She's pretty much down for the count now. Seeing Lena in trouble, Light takes another bite of a skill fruit, hoping this time it grants him something useful. Fortunately, the skill he gains seems promising. As the dragon closes in on Lena, Light hurls a rock at its face to divert its attention. With the dragon now focused on him, Light readies himself to face it using his newly acquired skill. Curious, Lena asks Isla what skill Light just gained, and Isla explains that it's called Sleep Pixie. This skill allows Light to summon a cute pixie, and anything that inhales the pixie's dust will fall asleep. Light activates the Sleep Pixie and sends it at the dragon. While the dust is effective, the dragon is really fighting to stay awake. At this distance, the dosage of pixie dust isn't strong enough to force the dragon to fall asleep. According to Isla, Light's pixie can only fly up 3 meters away from him, so he needs to find a way to get close to the dragon's face. He comes up with an idea and picks up his broken sword so he can activate his sword god skill. Light hurls the blade at the ceiling, causing the roof to collapse. As the debris crashes to the ground, he uses the falling rubble as stepping stones to reach the dragon's face. Once there, he unleashes the pixie dust again, and this time, the dragon is knocked out cold. With the dragon incapacitated and unable to attack, Light urges them to move quickly and escape. As the building is on the verge of collapsing, they manage to get outside just in time, moments before the mansion crumbles to the ground behind them. Now that they are safe, Lena asks Light if he's alright after eating all those skill fruits. Light tells her he's fine since he doesn't want Lena to worry about him, but he is clearly out of breath, so something is definitely wrong. The group rides back to town on their horses, and Light is fighting just to stay conscious. By the time they finally reach the city gates, Light's body gives out, and he collapses to the floor. Meanwhile, the cloaked man returns Drayna to the Holy Sister and prepares to leave. Before he departs, the Holy Sister stops him and asks for his thoughts on Light after observing him. The man admits that Light is far stronger than he initially expected, particularly since he was able to defeat a dragon. However, the man reassures her that he doesn't believe Light poses any real threat to her plan. The Holy Sister hadn't anticipated that Light would be this powerful, as the strength he's displayed is comparable to that of the a priori. There's clearly something unique about him, but regardless of what it is, she already has significant plans for him in the coming future. After the exhausting expedition, Isla